Oh, all right. Well, it is April 29th, which means it's the 29th day of National Poetry Month and the beginning of book 12, our last book of Paradise Lost. Yeah, I don't know. Caught me post-workout, pre-shower, and feeling some feelings about the fact that we are still doing pandemic poetry after 29 days. Of course, we've been in the pandemic itself for over 50 days, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I sort of am. When I set out to do this, I had sort of really one thought in my mind, like, well, two thoughts in my mind, I guess. Oh, who am I? More than that. But I was trying to think of some sort of task that would be interesting and fun and that would visually mark the time of this socially distanced, quarantine-y pandemic situation. And that would, I don't know, satisfy my like nerdy interests. And frankly, I teach chunks of Paradise Lost, large chunks of Paradise Lost, but haven't read the whole thing in, I don't know, since Jonathan Goldberg's seminar at Emory a million years ago for me. So like 2009, 10-ish. So I figured I ought to pick it up and read the whole thing again. So I was looking for text that was long enough to get us through National Poetry Month and to I don't know, sort of like very naively thought that perhaps that would get us to close to the end of the pandemic too, but clearly that's not the case. So now I find myself at a little bit of a crossroads. What to read next? Because I like this. This is pleasant. And even though National Poetry Month will be over tomorrow, the other goals, objectives of this project aren't over yet. So I don't know if anyone is listening, which I don't think anyone is, which is fine because this is for me. And maybe my poor students in the future or somebody else's poor students, sorry. If you have suggestions, I'm all ears. Right, so book 12, we're gonna pick up, I'll read the argument like always, and then I will also read the first half of book 12, which is line 1 through line 370, through 371. It's a very short book. All right, here we go. Book 12, the argument. And obviously, I'm not taking advantage of the fact that Georgia has opened its salons back up. Yeah. Opting to be safe rather than sorry. Support my stylist from afar rather than potentially bring some coronavirus to her. Not that I have it, as far as I know. Anyway, okay. Way too much digression. The angel Michael continues from the flood to relate what shall succeed. Then, in the mention of Abraham, comes by degrees to explain who that seed of the woman shall be, which was promised Adam and Eve in the fall. His incarnation, death, resurrection, and ascension. The state of the church till his second coming. Adam, greatly satisfied and recomforted by these relations and promises, descends the hill with Michael. Wakens Eve, who all this while had slept, but with gentle dreams composed to quietness of mind and submission. Michael, in either hand, leads them out of paradise, the fiery sword waving behind them, and the cherubim taking their stations to guard the place. Okay, so just in case you had forgotten, the book 11 ended with us at the flood and the promise of a person who was good enough, upright enough to be saved, and through him and his family, all of mankind regenerated, and through their actions, the beasts and the birds and the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, saved to repopulate the earth after the flood. So we're picking up at that point. this is really doing is making me want to teach this whole thing to my high schoolers. Blame it on COVID. Okay. As one who in his journey baits at noon, though bent on speed, so here the archangel paused betwixt the world destroyed and the world restored, if Adam aught perhaps might interpose. Then when transition sweet, new speech resumes. Thus thou hast seen one world begin and end, and man as from a second stock proceed. Much thou hast yet to see, but I perceive thy mortal sight to fail. Objects divine must needs impair and weary human sense. Henceforth what is to come I will relate, though thou therefore give due audience and attend. This second source of men, while yet but few, and while the dread of judgment past remains fresh in their minds, fearing the deity, with some regard to what is just and right, shall lead their lives and multiply apace, laboring the soil, and reaping plenteous crop, corn, wine, and oil. And from the herd or flock, oft sacrificing bullock, lamb, or kid, with large wine offerings poured, and sacred feast, shall spend their days in joy unblamed, and dwell long time in peace by families and tribes under paternal rule, till one shall rise of proud ambitious heart, who not content with fair equality, fraternal state, will arrogate dominion undeserved over his brethren, and quite dispossess concord and law of nature from the earth. Hunting, and men not beasts shall be his game, with war and hostile snare, such as refuse subjection to his empire tyrannous. A mighty hunter, thence, he shall be styled before the Lord, as in despite of heaven, or from heaven claiming second sovereignty, and from rebellion shall derive his name, though of rebellion others he accuse. He with a crew whom like ambition joins with him or under him to tyrannize, marching from Eden towards the west, shall find the plain, wherein a black bituminous gurge boils out from underground, the mouth of hell. Of brick, and of that stuff they cast to build a city and a tower, whose top may reach to heaven, and get themselves a name, lest far dispersed in foreign lands their memory be lost, regardless whether good or evil fame. But God, who oft descends to visit men unseen, and through their habitations walks to mark their doings, them beholding soon, comes down to see their city, ere the tower obstruct heaven towers, and in derision sets upon their tongues a various spirit to raise quite out their native language, and instead to sow a jangling noise of words unknown. Forthwith a hideous gabble rises loud among the builders. Each to other calls, not understood, till hoarse, and all in rage, as mocked they storm. Great laughter was in heaven, and looking down to see the hubbub strange and hear the din. Thus was the building left ridiculous, and the work confusion named. Whereto, thus Adam fatherly displeased. O execrable son, so to aspire above his brethren, to himself assuming authority usurped, from God not given. He gave us only over beast, fish, fowl dominion absolute. That right we hold by his donation, but man over men he made not Lord, such title to himself reserving, human left from human free. But this usurper his encroachment proud stays not on man. To God his tower intends siege and defiance. Wretched man, what food will he convey up thither to sustain himself and his rash army, where thin air above the clouds will pine his entrails gross and famish him of breath, if not of bread? To whom thus Michael: justly thou abhorrest that son who on the quiet state of men such trouble brought, affecting to subdue rational liberty. Yet know withal, since thy original lapse, true liberty is lost, which always with right reason dwells twinned, and from her hath no individual being. Reason in man obscured, or not obeyed, immediately inordinate desires and upstart passions catch the government from reason, and to servitude reduce man till then free. Therefore, since he permits within himself unworthy powers to reign over free reason, God in judgment just subjects him from without to violent lords, who oft as undeservedly enthrall his outward freedom. Tyranny must be, though to the tyrant thereby no excuse. Yet sometimes nations will decline so low from virtue, which is reason, that no wrong but justice, and some fatal curse annexed, deprives them of their outward liberty, their inward lost. Witness the irreverent son of him who built the ark, who, for the shame done to his father, heard this heavy curse, servant of servants, on his vicious race. Thus will this latter, as the former world, still tend from bad to worse, till God at last, wearied with their iniquities, withdraw his presence from among them, and avert his holy eyes. Resolving from henceforth to leave them to their own polluted ways, and one peculiar nation to select from all the rest, of whom to be invoked a nation from one faithful man to spring. Him on this side, Euphrates yet residing, bred up in idol worship. Oh, that men, canst thou believe, should be so stupid grown, while yet the patriarch lived who scaped the flood, as to forsake the living God, and fall to worship their own work in wood and stone for gods. Yet him God the Most High vouchsafes to call by vision from his father's house, his kindred and false gods, into a land which he will show him, and from him will raise a mighty nation, and upon him shower his benediction so, that in his seed all nations shall be blessed. He straight obeys, not knowing to what land, yet firm believes. I see him, but thou canst not. With what faith he leaves his gods, his friends, and native soil, of Chaldea, passing now the ford to Haran, after him a cumbrous train of herds and flocks, and numerous servitude. Not wandering poor, but trusting all his wealth with God, who called him, in a land unknown. Canaan he now attains. I see his tents pitched about Shechem, and the neighboring plain of Moreh. There by promise he receives gift to his progeny of all that land, from Hamath northward to the desert south. Things by their names I call, though yet unnamed. From Hermon east to the great western sea, Mount Hermon, yonder sea, each place behold in prospect as I point them. On the shore, Mount Carmel, here the double-founted stream Jordan, true limit eastward. But his sons shall dwell to Senir, that long ridge of hills. This ponder, that all nations of the earth shall in his seed be blessed. By that seed is meant thy great deliverer, who shall bruise the serpent's head, whereof to thee anon plainlier shall be revealed. This patriarch blessed, whom faithful Abraham due time shall call, a son, and of his son's son a grandchild leaves, like him in faith, in wisdom, and renown. The grandchild, with 12 sons increased, departs from Canaan to a land hereafter called Egypt, divided by the river Nile. See where it flows, disgorging its 7 mouths into the sea. To sojourn in that land he comes invited by a younger son in time of death, in time of dearth, a son whose worthy deeds raise him to be the second in that realm of Pharaoh. There he dies and leaves his race growing into a nation, and now grown, suspected to a sequent king who seeks to stop their overgrowth, as inmate guests too numerous. Whence of guests he makes them slaves inhospitably, and kills their infant males, till by 2 brethren, those 2 brethren called Moses and Aaron, sent from God to claim his people from enthrallment, they return with glory and spoil back to their promised land. But first, the lawless tyrant, who denies to know their God or message to regard, must be compelled by signs and judgments dire. To blood unshed the rivers must be turned. Frogs, lice, and flies must all his palace fill with loathed intrusion, and fill all the land. His cattle must of rot and murrain die. Botches and blains must all his flesh emboss, and all his people. Thunder mixed with hail mixed with fire, must rend the Egyptian sky and wheel on the earth, devouring where it rolls. What it devours not, herb or fruit or grain, a darksome cloud of locusts swarming down must eat, and on the ground leave nothing green. Darkness must overshadow all his bounds, palpable darkness, and blot out 3 days. Last, with one midnight stroke, all the firstborn of Egypt must lie dead. Thus, with 10 wounds, the river dragon tamed at length submits to let his sojourners depart, and oft humbles his stubborn heart, but still as ice, more hardened after thaw, till in his rage pursuing whom he late dismissed, the sea swallows him with his host. But them let's pass as on dry land between two crystal walls, awed by the rod of Moses, so to stand divided, till his rescued gain their shore. Such wondrous power God to his saint will lend, though present in his angel, who shall go before them in a cloud and pillar of fire, by day a cloud, by night a pillar of fire, to guide them in their journey and remove behind them, while the obdurate king pursues. All night he will pursue, but his approach darkness defends between till morning watch. Then through the fiery pillar and the cloud, God looking forth will trouble all his host and craze their chariot wheels, when by command Moses once more his potent rod extends over the sea. The sea his rod obeys. On their embattled ranks the waves return and overwhelm their war. The race elect safe towards Canaan from the shore advanced, through the wild desert, not the readiest way, lest entering on the Canaanite alarmed, war terrify them inexpert, and fear return them back to Egypt, choosing rather inglorious life with servitude. For life to noble and ignoble is more sweet, untrained in arms, where rashness leads not on. This also shall they gain by their delay in the wide wilderness. There they shall found their government, and their great senate choose, through the 12 tribes, to rule by laws ordained. God from the Mount of Sinai, whose gray top shall tremble, he descending, will himself in thunder, lightning, and loud trumpets sound ordain them laws, part such as appertain to civil justice, part religious rites of sacrifice, informing them by types and shadows of that destined seed to bruise the serpent, by what means he shall achieve mankind's deliverance. But the voice of God to mortal ear is dreadful. They beseech that Moses might report to them his will, and terror cease. He grants what they besought, instructed that to God is no access without mediator, whose high office now Moses in figure bears, to introduce one greater, of whose day he shall foretell, and all the prophets in their age the times of great Messiah shall sing. Thus laws and rights established, such delight hath God in men obedient in his will, that he vouchsafes among them to set up his tabernacle, the Holy One with mortal men to dwell. By his prescript, a sanctuary is framed of cedar, overlaid with gold, therein an ark, and in the ark his testimony, the records of his covenant. Over these a mercy seat of gold between the wings of 2 bright cherubim. Before him burn 7 lamps as in a zodiac, representing the heavenly fires. Over the tent a cloud shall rest by day, a fiery gleam by night, save when they journey, and at length they come, conducted by his angel to the land promised to Abraham and his seed. The rest were long to tell, how many battles fought, how many kings destroyed, and kingdoms won, or how the sun shall in mid-heaven stand still a day entire, and night's due course adjourn, man's voice commanding, sun in Gibeon stand, and thou moon in the vale of Ailon, till Israel overcome. So call the third from Abraham, son of Isaac, and from him his whole descent, who thus shall Canaan win. Here Adam interposed. O sent from heaven, enlightener of my darkness, gracious things thou hast revealed, those chiefly which concern just Abraham and his seed. Now first I find mine eyes true opening, and my heart much eased, erewhile perplexed with thoughts what would become of me and all mankind. But now I see his day, in whom all nations shall be blessed, favor unmerited by me, who sought forbidden knowledge by forbidden means. This yet I apprehend not. Why to those among whom God will deign to dwell on earth, so many and so various laws are given? So many laws argue so many sins among them. How can God with such reside? To whom thus Michael, doubt not but that sin will reign among them, as of thee begot, and therefore was law given them to evince their natural pravity by stirring up sin against law to fight, that when they see law can discover sin, but not removed, save by those shadowy expiations weak, the blood of bulls and goats, they may conclude some blood more precious must be paid for man, just for unjust, which the law, just for unjust, that in such righteousness to them by faith imputed, they may find justification towards God and peace of conscience, which the law by ceremonies cannot appease, nor man the moral part perform, and not performing cannot live. So law appears imperfect, and but given with purpose to resign them in full time up to a better covenant, discipline from shadowy types to truth, from flesh to spirit, from imposition of strict laws to free acceptance of large grace, from servile fear to filial, works of law to works of faith. And therefore shall not Moses, though of God highly beloved, being but the minister of law, his people into Canaan lead. But Joshua, whom the Gentiles Jesus call, his name and office bearing, who shall quell the adversary serpent and bring back through the world's wilderness, long wandering man, safe to eternal paradise of rest. Meanwhile, they in their earthly Canaan place long time shall dwell and prosper. But when sins national interrupt their public peace, provoking God to raise them enemies, from whom as oft he saves them penitent by judges first, then under kings, of whom the second, both for piety renowned and puissant deeds, a promise shall receive irrevocable, that his regal throne forever shall endure. The like shall sing all prophecy, that of the royal stock of David, so I name this king, shall rise a son, the woman's seed to thee foretold to Abraham, as in whom shall trust all nations, and to kings foretold, of kings the last, for of his reign shall be no end. But first a long succession must ensue, and his next son for wealth and wisdom famed, the clouded ark of God, till then intense wandering, shall in a glorious temple enshrine. Such follow him, as shall be registered part good, part bad, of bad the longer scroll, whose foul idolatries and other faults heaped to the popular sum will so incense God, as to leave them and expose their land, their city, his temple, and his holy ark with all his sacred things, a scorn and prey to that proud city, whose high walls thou sawest, left in confusion, Babylon thence called. There in captivity he lets them dwell, the space of 70 years, then brings them back, remembering mercy, and his covenant sworn to David, established as the days of heaven. Returned from Babylon by leave of kings their lords, whom God disposed, the house of God they first re-edify, and for a while in mean estate live moderate, till grown in wealth and multitude, factious they grow. But first among the priests dissension springs, men who attend the altar, and should most endeavor peace. Their strife pollution brings upon the temple itself. At last they seize the scepter, and regard not David's sons, then lose it to a stranger, that the true anointed king Messiah might be born, bard of his right. Yet at his birth a star unseen before in heaven proclaims him come, and guides the eastern sages who inquire his place to offer incense, myrrh, and gold. His place of birth a solemn angel tells to simple shepherds keeping watch by night. They gladly thither haste, and by a choir of squadroned angels hear his carol sung. A virgin is his mother, but his sire the power of the Most High. He shall ascend the throne hereditary, and bound his reign with earth's wide bounds, his glory with the heavens. All right. Through rainstorms and dog barking and growling as she plays with her towel. Exciting stuff here. Tomorrow is it. We finish up. We will start in line 372. and go to line 649. Okay, I guess we will wait for then and that. In the meantime, maybe I'll have some suggestions or ideas for the next thing to read.